Teyvat. Beautiful, mysterious, magical, mythical Teyvat. Such a shame none of it is real. Wake up, traveler. You have slept for far too long. It all started with Exenzirkel. More specifically, with a little floating island where the witches held their parties. Everything about it just screamed Alice in Wonderland to me. We know the writers sprinkle references into the story and lore whenever they can, so it is very possible they did it on purpose. However, the deeper I dug, the more I realized there are a lot of references not about Alice in Wonderland, but about its sequel, Alice Through the Looking Glass. I'll give you a quick rundown of the story for those who may not be familiar with it. One day, while she was playing with her two kittens, Alice became curious about what life would be like on the other side of a mirror. So she climbed onto the fireplace mantel and poked at a mirror hung on the wall. To her surprise, she was able to step through. The first thing she notices on the other side is that the chessmen, chess pieces, are now alive. The second thing is that logic is no longer logicking. There are all manners of strange things happening, including several nursery rhymes that have come to life and become real. When she steps out of the house, she discovers that the entire countryside is now a gigantic chessboard and she, herself, is a white pawn. As she advances on the board, she meets several characters, but the only ones that are relevant to this theory are the White Queen, the Red King, and the Tweedle twins. The Tweedle brothers are the first set of characters she meets. They provoke Alice by telling her that she may be nothing more than an imaginary figure that exists only in the Red King's mind, being that said king is presently snoring away under a tree nearby. Afterwards, Alice meets the White Queen, who boasts about her ability to remember future events, keywords being remember and future. She doesn't foresee them, she remembers them, and she actually proves that this is a power that she possesses. Alice keeps advancing through the board and eventually becomes a queen because she was a pawn and got promoted. She is then pretty much forced to host a party for the white and red queens where she finally snaps and starts shaking the red queen, who she has decided is responsible for all this madness. And then she promptly wakes up in the armchair where she had fallen asleep. None of it had been real. It had all been a dream. And yet she could not forget the words of the Tweedle brothers. She couldn't shake the idea that she, herself, might have been a dream. The book then ends with this line: "Life, what is it but a dream?" I am sure you are already establishing connections, but we will tackle this monster slowly because, trust me, wasteful the writers are not. Everything about Through the Looking Glass has been referenced in Genshin. Well, except for the kittens. That would be cute though. Anyway, as you have probably already realized, I am implying that all of Teyvat, including its people, are a dream. A simulation, if you will. A projection. There is a mirror within the three realms, and Teyvat just happens to be on the dream side. In fact, there are several mirrors, some metaphorical, others very much tangible. The first one that stood out to me was the twins. They mirror each other perfectly in pretty much all aspects. One is male, the other female. One has a dark color scheme, the other a predominantly white one. And above all else, their journeys are mirrored. The Abyss siblings started their journey in Conria and worked their way out to the other nations from there, while the Traveler started in Mondstadt and is now painstakingly making their way to Conria. The literal mirror where the twins see each other's reflections during the Carrybear Archon quest is meant to highlight all of these parallels, to show how alike the siblings really are, just in reverse. But there is another much more interesting mirror in-game. The official website states, 500 years ago, the collapse of an ancient civilization turned the universe upside down. At first I took this literally. Just like you do not notice the Earth rotating at breakneck speeds, if the flip was instantaneous and not accompanied by destructive events, you probably wouldn't notice it either. But Irminsul challenges this interpretation. We know that it grows upside down, so the parts of it that you see above ground are actually its roots, meaning the canopy should be reaching down into the ground, possibly towards the abyss, as we know some fallen branches can be found there. But it isn't. Take a look at the cavern where the canopy is located and try to spot what is wrong with it. Got it? The tree trunk should be growing through the roof, not the ground. This part of Irminsul is inverted in relation to the rest of it, or at the very least to the roots that we can see. which makes absolutely no sense, unless this cavern was mirrored. Everything from this cavern up is Teyvat, one side of the mirror, while everything from this cavern down is the other side. We can make an educated guess and say that Conria is located below this cavern. We know that it is somewhere beneath Sumeru, and when we look at the top of the cavern, you can see this reddish light which seems all too familiar. This may be the Sustainer's handiwork. If there is a place that could still look cataclysmic to this day, it would be the Fallen Nation. Conria might have also had ties of some sort to Irminsul. Dainsleif is known as the Bowkeeper and claims to have knowledge of fate itself. If something knows about fate, it would be Irminsul, but we will get back to this. King Irmin may also be a reference to Odin, while Irminsul is a reference to Yggdrasil, the World Tree. So when you put all this together and add the quote from the website, it could imply that it was Conria that caused the cavern in this part of Irminsul to flip, alongside with itself. Yes, I do think the Godless Nation also flipped, and that can actually be explained by the Abyss Order's plans. We know that the Conrians used forbidden knowledge to create machines that were not bound by this world's laws. That exact wording is important, remember it. At this point, I think we can confidently say that forbidden knowledge is abyssal power. Case in point, Conria was flooded by monsters for its trouble, and thus the cataclysm began. It's very possible that Celestia didn't strike because of the godless people, but as a defense mechanism against forbidden knowledge. Cursing them was just a bonus. However, even if the original surge of abyssal power was an accident, the Conrians were hooked. At least some of them. Clothar went on to be fascinated by the Sinner and the Abyss and created the Abyss Order. Such order is, to this day, creating plans that revolve around turning things in Teyvat upside down. Think about the defiled statue of the Seven, or even the inverted seat in the chasm to which the Order flocked. No matter what, they seem to want to be upside down, likely to bring themselves closer to the Abyss. You see, the whole flipping accident within Teyvat might be only 500 years old, but the Abyss was almost surely always flipped. And it all comes down to the stairs. I know, this is basically ancient history by now, but the stairs don't make sense. We descend deeper into the spiral abyss, and yet the stairs lead up. The only scenario in which this would make sense would be if the entire thing was flipped in relation to Teyvat. And it makes sense that, upon invading Conria, the Abyss, which is known to be so destructive, molded the nation in its image. Thus, the Abyss Order's strange habits of flipping things might be an attempt to bring Teyvat closer to the Abyss. Okay, so we have this hypothetical, metaphorical mirror with Teyvat on one side and the cavern, Conria, and the Abyss on the other. What does this mean? Well, like I said, if we keep on rolling with the Alice through the Looking Glass references, it would mean that one of the sides corresponds to real life while the other is the dream, and Teyvat would be none other than the dream. The biggest evidence of this? The Light Realm, or rather, the lack thereof. We were told that there are 3 realms within this universe. There is the Void Realm, or the Abyss, the Light or Elemental Realm, and the Human Realm. The Human Realm is the youngest of the 3, having been created by the Primordial One after it defeated the 7 Sovereign Dragons. It is supposed to be Teyvat, everything that we have ever gotten to know in-game. Except it isn't. We know about the creation of the Human Realm from the infamous stone tablet before Sun and Moon. The problem is that it is filled with lies. It states the Primordial One, along with one of its shades, created the birds of the air, the beasts of the earth, and the fish of the sea, as well as all kinds of plants. And lastly, they created humanity. The problem was that the 7 nations were already standing before the Primordial One ever arrived, including Sumeru, with its lush rainforest, full of all kinds of plants. Additionally, Celestia sent down a nail to fix the damage Nibelung had inflicted when it freed forbidden knowledge, and that was what created the desert. Keep in mind that this is happening prior to the supposed remake of the world and creation of the Human Realm. So why is the Sumeru we know exactly like the Sumeru Apep ruled over? The only sensible explanation seems to be that nothing changed, that we are actually living in the Light Realm. Because that's another thing. The Abyss is a physical place one can reach. It's real, it's tangible. But we have never heard of anyone going to the Light Realm. What's more, after the dragons lost, why would those who refused to submit flee to the sea instead of going home to the light realm? If Teyvat really is a human realm, then that should be something they could do. But I don't think Teyvat is a light realm. Apep said that the victor of the war would inherit the right to shape the worlds, and we know that the Primordial One won. Additionally, I think its signature may be a little bit all over its creation. Have you ever noticed a bioluminescence scattered across Teyvat? For instance, when you step on the grass, you can see these light blue particles rising to the sky. These are similar to the ones your characters dissolve into upon their death, and are also similar to the light emitted by the statues of the Seven. These particles are the same color as the crystal contained within the celestial nails, which we know to be, well, of celestial origin. So it appears that there is celestial power all over. My theory is that Teyvat is actually a replica, a projection of the light realm, one that exists only in the Red King's mind, and said Red King would be none other than the Primordial One. Side note, if the Red King reminds you of the Scarlet King, aka Dashred because of his name, you are not alone, but I can't really find any connections here. Now, interestingly enough, Dashred came into possession of a great deal of forbidden knowledge that has been referred to as the Truth by Apep, and a lot of Dashred's civilization was located underground, almost as if he was also trying to take them closer to the Abyss. Alright, but what evidence do we have suggesting this points towards the whole thing being a dream? Quite a lot, actually. We have seen these dream projections or simulations being pulled off not once, but twice, just at a smaller scale, and when we put them together, there is a lot to learn. The first dream we encountered was the Sub-Zero's festival Samsara, where the Akasha was used to keep the people in a dream state in order to collect wisdom. The main focus of this simulation was the environment, not the people. What do I mean by this? Well, the Akasha, as powerful as it is, likely has a computing limit. Keeping such a realistic simulation up is no easy feat, so the researchers focused on creating a lifelike environment in order to not cue the dreamers about what was going on, and in fact, they didn't need to focus on the people as their consciousness was within the dream. That said, when Dunyarzad became too weak to keep dreaming, the Akasha created a simulated version of her that did not act like the real deal. Thus, the focus was on the environment, more specifically on Sumeru City. The Traveler reported seeing several other dream zones, but all of them were nonsensical. The Akasha was likely not powerful enough to generate a larger illusion, either that or it would require way too much Yanana energy, so instead, no one was allowed to leave in order to keep them contained within the limits of the dream. Keep that in mind. However, the illusion wasn't only contained in terms of space, but also time. The whole cycle lasted less than 24 hours, likely less than 12 actually, as it reset right as the Traveler and Paimon were going to bed. This might, again, be meant to avoid the Akasha's limitations. Now, interestingly, time also did not flow normally. In fact, it flowed much faster. A person can only live without water for approximately 3 days, and obviously no one was eating or drinking while dreaming. Even though weaker individuals like Dunyarzad were at death's door, most people seemed okay. When you keep in mind that the dream looped many times, it becomes apparent that time was flowing rather differently than it would in the real world. Or what passes for it. You know what this reminds me of? You know how 3 days in Teyvat equal 3 months in the Abyss? Yeah. Anyway, moving on. Lastly, this whole experience taught us that a simulated dream requires a host, which in this case was Nilu. The second time we encountered a simulated dream, the host was Beinuni, who had uploaded his mind into the Akasha in order to be able to keep the dream running forever. This time around, the focus was on the people, as he wanted to be reunited with his deceased wife. Thus, he created a hyper-realistic dream version of her. Unfortunately for him, Nahida shut down the Akasha, dropping his consciousness and depriving him of the computing power needed to keep the dream going. So instead, he started farming the Yanana energy of the other dreamers, creating dream versions of their lost loved ones as well in order to keep them coming back. The thing is, the deeper into the dream you go, the more energy is devoted to the dream people, reducing the environment to the bare minimum, making it nonsensical. Okay, so this tells us that it is absolutely possible to create very lifelike dream people, as well as a very realistic environment. However, the computing power needed to do so may not always be available. The thing is, the Primordial One isn't the Akasha. The Akasha was just a machine created by Brukadvata, a single god that leaned on the heavens' glow. And now we are talking about the heavens themselves. So an illusion on the level of Teyvat would not be impossible. Which isn't to say that it doesn't have its limitations, but we will get to that. Again, just because it could happen doesn't mean it did, but there are still some sus quotes and item descriptions I want to talk about, starting with the dream solvent. It states, "People once believed that spirits and memories had some material form. If someone dreamed of heaven before waking up clutching a flower, then that blossom must have been made from such a fantasy. Dream solvent dissolves that which is obtained from memory and transforms it into some other dream." Interesting. So this seems to be attributing some creational power to dreams, the ability to materialize things. I also find it very interesting that out of all the examples they could have gone with, they chose a flower being created as a consequence of one dreaming about heaven. So we have dreams that become reality. Tiny little side note, there is only a single character that has gifted this dream solvent during their birthday, Zhongli. In his letter, he goes on to call the traveler a mirror. Anyway, the most damning evidence of all comes from the artifact set Flowers of Paradise Lost. It tells us the story of Nabu Malikata after she was expelled from the heavens and how she came to help Deshret obtain forbidden knowledge. We know that the Scarlet King opposed Telesha, even refusing a gnosis that was offered to him. He wished to transcend the absurd shackles that govern this world, and according to this artifact set, it seems that he wished to free humanity from the celestial clutches as a result. I am going to read you some quotes from the description of Wilting Fist. "Such a carefree dream was certain to be unmade. In ruins where lies are sundered, humanity will become the king of kings. An idea that joined the wisdom of thousands and the great attempt at binding their dreams to power. What hides here is more than lies, but also the future of humanity, burning like the sparks of hope. Dreams will always dissolve, their landscapes fated to collapse. This is the true meaning of the blooming flowers. Only by suffering through the destruction of a god's illusions can humanity learn to rise against divine will." So we have this dream that is being used as a synonym for lies, one that is fated to end, to dissolve. And once it does, humanity will finally be free. It will become the king of kings. A god's delusion here is probably referring to the dream the Primordial One dreams. It is a delusion in the sense that it isn't real, it is an illusion. What I find really interesting is that flowers are being brought up again, and I believe this is a reference to Conria, more specifically to the Teyvat, the flowers that Lumine wears on her hair, the ones that petrify once taken out of their home nation and will only wilt when they are returned to Conrian soil. May I remind you that this particular artifact piece is called Wilting Fist? Conria knew too much. They were after before Sun and Moon, even before the people of Enkanomiya left for the surface. And they are still after any fictional story they believe might contain information that has been deleted from Irminsul, which, by the way, is a reference to the way nursery rhymes come to life in Through the Looking Glass. Remember what I said about machines that are not bound by this world's laws? In this artifact set, we have a description to the same effect. We are told about the absurd shackles that govern the world. Do you remember that one infamous quote from the loading screen? Teyvat has its own rules. Just like the dream world in Through the Looking Glass did. It follows dream logic. And according to such logic, wouldn't dreaming inside of a dream be equivalent to being awake? So, in the Travail trailer, when Dainsleif says,
"In the perpetual meantime of a sheltered eternity, most are content to live and not to dream. But in the hidden corners where the god's gaze does not fall, there are those who dream of dreaming."
Could this be implying that Conria knew about the dream and was looking to bend the laws of such a dream in order to wake up? Conria flipped and was destroyed because it left the dream, the simulation. Conria woke up and chose violence. I'm sorry, I had to. So when the goddess of flowers talks about these flowers in bloom, she could be referring to Conria eventually winning against the heavens and being rebuilt, allowing the Teyvats to bloom again. We do see a Sea of Teyvat while Dane talks about the country chapter, after all. But now you could say, wait a minute, Nabu died way before the Cataclysm. How could she even know about it? Much less about a hypothetical future victory for the godless nation. Well, remember what I said about dream simulation limitations? Teyvat likely also has them. One of the questions that has been plaguing players since the beginning is why Sustainer even stopped the twins from leaving in the first place. We now know that the Abyss twin was not involved with the Abyss Order that did not even exist yet at the time, so they had no reason to return. If the Sustainer had allowed them to leave, she would have saved Celestia a great many headaches. But she did stop them. Most likely because this divine delusion would have been dispelled otherwise. In the same way that the Sage's and Benuni's dream fell apart the farther away you were from the central focus of the dream, the same may be happening at the Teyvatian scale. If they had left, they might have realized that it was all a dream, and then they might have taken matters into their own hands. But this is not the only limitation of this dream. Nabu could probably know the future because she already lived through it countless times. After all of Teyvat may be in a samsara. We will tackle that, alongside with the true identity of the Primordial One and the twins' journey and goals, in part 2, because I refuse to edit another 40-minute long video. Anyway, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think it is possible that Teyvat is just one giant dream? Do let me know your thoughts and theories in the comments. Anyway, that's all from me today. My name is Blue and I'll see you again soon. Safe journey, travelers!